Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to the first lecture in our lecture series, Leadership Lecture Series, Alumni Speak. We have been doing this now for about a year and a half, and we have had, I think, more than 30 speakers, close to 40 speakers already. It was actually envisioned as a talk that we offer once a month, maximum 2 a month, but there's been so much demand and good response, both from the alumni side and the student side, that we've been averaging virtually one a week during the semester. And looks like this semester also will be pretty much able to keep up that same rate. The next lecture will be next week, for example. So I'm very happy to kick off this season with Gandharv Bakshi as our speaker. He's a 2005 BTech Computer Science alumnus. And of course, what he's most proud of, I'm sure, is the fact that he was Gen Sec at IIT Madras when he was here. And I'm sure that he'll touch upon that in his talk as well. He is the co-founder of Lumos Design Technology, which is India's first solar apparel and accessories company. Before that, he had co-founded Alitum Solutions as a second-year student at IIM Bangalore. And he's worked for 4 years in sales and marketing at Tejas Networks. And he is going to talk today about his journey from being the Gen Sec at IIT Madras to being an entrepreneur. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of very interesting and very valuable lessons that you guys can take away from his talk.
Thank you, Professor Nagarajan. Professor A.D. Chandy, Professor L.S. Ganesh, Mr. Suresh, thanks a lot for your invitation here. It's a tremendous honor to be here. So I was here around 8 years back, except that I was on the organizing part of this. So I was the one who would go to hostels and tell people that, hey, there's a talk, please go and occupy the hall, right? So I was responsible for a lot of this. It's good to see that who was in the organizing committee has done a good job. So yeah, so as you can see, I was a 2005 graduate. I did my BTech in computer science here. So before I get into the whole entrepreneurship talk, right, I'll just brief you on what I've done till date. So I graduated in 2005. I think I developed this habit of looking for placement outside the system, and that's what I did at IIT Madras as well. I opted out of mainstream placement, and I actually looked for sales and marketing job. Thanks in large part to mentoring from Professor LSG here, who recommended that if you want to truly learn business, go and work in business development. So that's what I did, and I landed up in a job with sales and marketing at this company called Tejas Networks, which is this Indian telecom product company started by Gururaj Deshpande, who is also an IIT Madras alum. Back then, Tejas was still a 4-year-old company, and they had a very new marketing department, and I was one of the first few members of that marketing department. So I worked there in sales and marketing for 4 years. Following that, I did my MBA at IIM Bangalore. So I had a fairly uneventful first year at at IIMB. Following that, in the second year, I started a business. I realized that the best training for entrepreneurship you can get is to actually just start a business. Don't go do anything else. Start any small business, and that's how you can learn the most. So I did actually start a business in my second year, and several student projects that we did, we actually even got paid for. Again, I opted out of placements at IIM Bangalore, and I started Lumos Design Technology in 2012, and hopefully that's what I'll be doing for the next 20 or 30 years. So I'll take you through that journey in a bit of time. So just to give you an idea, I had 2 stints as student. Once was in IIT Madras, and once was in IIM Bangalore, and they were both fairly different. One was conventional to an extent. So when I entered IIT Madras, I was fairly confused. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Only towards the end of my stint here, towards the end of third year, fourth year, that's when I knew that I wanted to start a business of my own someday, and I started taking an interest in the business side of things. But till third year, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Whereas I entered IIM Bangalore with a very clear vision that, hey, this is it. After this, I'm going to start my own company, and that company is where I'll stay for the next 20, 30 years. So accordingly, my life was student life was vastly different at IIM Bangalore. Uh, so to give you an idea, when I entered IIT Madras, I was fairly caught up in the glamour of ranks and marks and so on, right? Which is something you do when there's nothing else to focus on. So for IIMB, I decided let's just study enough to get in, because ultimately these ranks, etc., wouldn't really affect your life for long after you graduate. Uh, one Another advantage I had at IIM Bangalore, since I'd worked for 4 years, was that I could actually practically figure out what was happening in each course. Uh, so to give you an example, whenever there would be a sales course or a marketing course, I could actually compare notes to what I did in my Tejas days and exactly understand what would work and what wouldn't work. So that gave a very practical bent to each of my courses there. And in today's day, there's no reason why you can't do that in engineering. So if you're taking a course in, say, in low power electronics or any other course, right? There's no reason why you can't actually go out, talk to companies that are actually working in that field, and figure out what the correlation between what you're learning and what they're actually using in the company there. So that sort of learning takes you far beyond the kind of learning which I did when I was in IIT Madras, which was study a day or two before exams, and yeah, you might get good marks, but then your learning is vastly reduced in such scenarios. Oh, sorry. Then one thing I did at IIT Madras was I took part in a whole host of these activities. So you have Sarang, Shastra. I was a general arrangement squad. Professor Edi Chandy was actually the dean at that time. So we spent many tense nights wondering over various student issues at that time. So I also contested elections for the hostel general secretary, and then I went on to contest successfully elections for the institute general secretary as well. All these things are fairly important because they took me out of my comfort zone. So looking back at it, right? I mean, winning an election is ultimately like marketing. So you have various segments in the hostel, and to each segment you decide, hey, this segment would probably find this aspect of my personality most attractive, or this segment is influenced by this role model. So looking back at it, fighting the elections, taking up those responsibilities was extremely good for me because it helped me actually expand it helped me grow my personality and so on, right? So that's something I absolutely do not regret doing. In IIM Bangalore, of course, I was focused on one thing, which is entrepreneurship. So I did not take part in any clubs, no cultural activities, nothing whatsoever. One regret I do have about what I didn't do at IIT Madras was I did not start a company. I did not get involved with startups, and these opportunities are today plentiful at IIT Madras, right? So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, even if you're not sure what you want to do, just go and spend time with startups. Go do some part-time projects with them, right? At IMB, I took part in several B plan competitions. I took up courses in entrepreneurship. They were okay. B plan competition ended up being uh, very theoretical in nature. But what I did, which was really useful, was to start a business, right? So we started taking up these projects. With each course, you have to do a project in a B school, right? So what we started doing was we started doing live projects. So uh, we would go to a company outside and say, hey, we have a course on market research, and we have to do a market research project anyways. So why don't we actually do a paid project for you? And a professor even reviews all our projects. So, well, you had free help from the professor. And that's how we monetize our projects, and that's the company that we ran in IIM Bangalore. Uh, there's one thing about placements, right, which I realized back then and which probably holds true even more today, is that placements can be very restrictive. So, of all the jobs that are out there, probably you'll have 5% or 10% of the jobs that come to campus, right? Some of the best jobs out there in terms of responsibility, in terms of what you learn, in terms of even salary for that matter, right? Some of the best jobs out there don't come on campus. So it's very liberating to opt out of placements, go and do a search outside campus. It's a great learning experience apart from the fact that it's liberating. So it's something that, again, is not for everyone. But if you have an idea that this is what my ideal job is, then I would suggest that you go after it, right? Even if that job doesn't come to IIT Madras, even if those people don't come for placements here, it's very liberating, and you will end up having a satisfying job at the end of it. Though it takes time and it requires some courage to do, because you'll probably go for 6 months without any placement while your friends are getting placed easily on campus. So that's something that I found to be tremendously useful. A couple of my friends at IIM Bangalore did that as well. In my batch, around 16 people opted out of placements. And I would say at least 13 or 14 of them were extremely satisfied. Uh, so I mean, do be open to that possibility of looking for a job outside campus. Get your dream job, you will find it. So going on, let me just explain what I did at Tejas Networks, where I worked in sales and marketing. So I did more of marketing at Tejas and less of sales, which is a regret I have, and I'll explain why. So in marketing, it's you probably have if you're interested in marketing, you probably know what it is. You work towards creating a brand. So we were working towards creating Tejas or Tejas Networks as a technology leader in its space in the telecom space. So as a result, I wrote a large number of white papers, articles, and writing is a very useful skill in today's world, right? So even on social media, for example, if you write a really interesting piece, it gets shared more often. If it's really informative, then more people read it, and automatically they start associating you as being a technology leader of sorts. So writing is a skill that I would recommend to each and every one of you, especially if you plan to get into either sales and marketing or be an entrepreneur yourself, right? Then we did conduct a lot of events, again, where you invite customers and so on. So apart from that, you do competition analysis, you do industry partnerships that, hey, we have two competing solutions. We belong to this camp of competing solutions. So let's partner with these 3-4 companies to offer a joint solution. So you start thinking of industry partnerships as well in marketing, and you start thinking of positioning that, hey, we have 4 different products, right? How does the customer differentiate between these products? So you get into all those issues. So there's this. So marketing tends to be a little more long-term focused. They say that the goal of marketing is to make sales redundant, right? So if you do a good job, 3-4 years from now, customers will buy from you on their own without you having to sell. But again, that's not how startups work. So I'll get to that in a minute. In sales, you end up, or at least in my particular job, I ended up selling specific solutions to customers. So our customers were all these telecom companies like Airtel or BSNL. So you'd figure out that, hey, these people want this telecom solution over the next 6 months. Then you'd prepare a solution and you'd go and talk to the customer, and you try to pitch a solution to them. You typically handle all customer queries and so on, right? It's a relatively short-term focused job. Again, this is my take on it. So there's one thing I learned in sales, right? So in sales, you end up being the end point for the customer. So you make a promise to the customer saying that, hey, I will deliver this product to you by so and so such and such date. But if the delivery guys don't deliver it on date, the customer will shout on you. And if you promise that, hey, the maintenance, we will have a 99% maintenance. If the maintenance guys don't do a good job, you're the one who uh, gets to hear it from the customer. So all in all, it's a very uncomfortable job, right? You have to make your revenues, you have to make your money. At the same time, you have very little control over how other departments of the company behave. And when I look back at it, that's exactly how entrepreneurship is. You have very little control. You have to get comfortable with the fact that you don't have enough control over several aspects of uh, the customer delivery process. And yet you still have to bring in money in the short term, right? In entrepreneurship, it's good to work on long-term issues like branding, but at the same time, most companies die within a year or two. So if you're not focused on the short term, well, branding has no value in the long term, right? Because as a company, you would probably not exist. So I realized that sales is probably one of the best trainings you can ever have for entrepreneurship. So if you're not sure if you want to take a job right now, but you still uh, want to become an entrepreneur at some stage, I would highly recommend you get into sales and uh, get yourself psychologically acclimatized to that whole way of working, right? So going back, I wish I had done more of sales. And if any of you have the opportunity, I would recommend that you train yourselves in sales before you take a plunge in entrepreneurship. This was a question that I had quite frequently, right? I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and for some reason I decided that I want to do an MBA as well. Uh, and that's a question that many of you would probably face, to MBA or not to MBA going ahead. So before I get into that, I realized that the answer to that depends on who you are or who you want to be as an entrepreneur. So typically, I'm simplifying this a bit for the sake of the talk. You have 2 kinds of people in any company that are absolutely required as founders. So you have the seller, right, and you have the builder. So the seller is typically the guy who handles the business part of it, who will handle the sales part of it, who would actually go and meet the customer, try to sell the solution to him, and so on, who would be responsible for building the customer relationships. And then you have the seller, right, who is the technology guy, who ensures that the product is developed, who probably even works on product development himself or herself, and decides the technology direction, right? So to a large extent, if you ever want to be a builder, if you're the technology guy, then an MBA usually does not add at all, right? There are some positives to doing an MBA if you are more on the seller side of things. It helps you round off your business education. Again, you have amazing contacts. So today I can call up my friend in HUL or McKinsey and ask them that, hey, I want to spread the word in, say, Northeast part of India. What is the best channel? And usually in these large companies, they have done all this. So it's very easy for me to get those answers, right? It also gives you adequate time to do a startup. So at least these days, an MBA at IIM Bangalore, for example, was not that as hectic as it used to be. Used to have classes from 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and after that, it's your time. So we had adequate time to actually even start a company. At the same time, it's a very costly option. EMI is basically the monthly repayment of the loan, right? That absolutely is a very short term and tactical aspect, but it can absolutely kill a startup if you have to pay a certain amount of money every month. And one thing I realized is that like I said, sales is one of the most important qualities you can have or skills you can have in a startup. And an MBA will not teach you that. It doesn't substitute a sales experience. So, and yeah, typically an MBA ends up being oriented towards large companies. So a lot of what I learned, I will probably use it 10 years from now at Lumos, right? So that's one disadvantage. These are a set of disadvantages that you have. So for example, if you today want to be an entrepreneur, but you're not decided on an MBA, I would suggest just go ahead, be an entrepreneur, start your companies. Don't worry about an MBA. You can actually acquire most of the knowledge that you want otherwise. So going ahead, I went into IIM Bangalore. I had decided that I will start a company. But there was a specific approach that I had to the ideation process, right? As to how do you come up with an idea for entrepreneurship? Like you want to start a company, but you don't have an idea, right? So I had a process, and again, this may not apply to all of you, but it's still something. So typically what I would do is I would look at all the problems that I face as a person, right? So typically what I advocate is that pick a problem that you face, look at all the problems you face, right? Life isn't perfect, and I'm sure you have many problems. And once you look at all the problems that you face, sorry, build the perfect solution for yourself. So that would probably be the first step. At least theoretically, build a perfect solution for yourself for that problem. And then the only thing you have to do is go and find out other people like you. It's quite unlikely that you're unique and no one else faces the same problem as you do. So it's quite likely that there's several other people who face the same problem as you, right? So to give you an idea, I used to be quite annoyed by this problem of battery life. I had these phones, I had this laptop, right? The phone, you actually call it a mobile phone, but at the same time, every 4-5 hours, you're supposed to find a plug point, right? So you're still bound to the wall in some sense. So it was truly not mobile, and it was quite annoying, especially when you work in sales and marketing. When you go to a customer setting and you say, "Hey, can I find a plug point?" It's quite embarrassing, and this is a problem I had. And a little bit of research revealed this very simple realization, right? That in a given day, we are exposed to around 500 watts of energy. So even now, there's actually a lot of light falling on me. So I should be able to tap at least some bit of this to charge my phone. So given that there's 500 watt of energy that falls on you over an entire day, you would ideally never need to go and look for a plug point. You can charge your phone, you can charge even your laptop if you're able to tap all the energy that falls in you. And that's how the idea of Lumos was born, right? So our mission in general is to tap as much of the energy as possible that's falling on you and use it to make our lives comfortable. So our first product, for example, was actually a bag, a fairly simple product with a solar panel. And what we do is that it enables you to charge your phone in your bag itself. And similarly, that's how the thought goes. But that gives you an insight into how at least I went about the whole idea of building the or developing the idea. So one thing I did realize is that they say entrepreneurs are fearless, but I was extremely scared. I'm still scared of failure, right? And most entrepreneurs I know are extremely scared of failure. No one wants to fail. So what I did as a first step was go and talk to a large number of entrepreneurs. Uh, I even talked to very well-known mentors. I suggest you also go and talk to them. You have several people, even in Chennai and Bangalore. You had Mukund Mohan, who is the CEO of Microsoft Accelerator. You have people like Vijay Anand in Chennai. I went and talked to them that, hey, you have seen many companies. Why do you think they failed? Again, in a very Indian context. And of course, in Bangalore, we even had this FailCon, which is a conference that celebrates failure. So what probably surprises rather what surprised me the most was that the most common reason why most companies, at least, again, this is not a very scientific research, this is based on data that these mentors had, was that the most common reason companies fail in India is because the co-founders fight and end up splitting up, right? So typically the co-founders end up being fairly young, and usually you have a typical model of two friends starting a company with 50% each, right? Problems develop in the second year, both are 50%, so no one knows whose opinion matters more. They end up splitting up, right? And this claims more companies than anyone else, right? So the most common question you get asked is that what if this large company comes into this field? But competition does not kill as many companies as co-founder fights do. Mismatch with what the customers want, right? Again, this might be specific to Bangalore. In Bangalore, we have several very engineering-focused companies where there is two people, brilliant engineers, building a product in their house, right? And it's a brilliantly engineered product, but typically these engineers haven't gone out and talked to a customer, right? Or if they've talked to a customer, they've come back with the uncomfortable feeling that, hey, that was not comfortable, let's not do it again, right? So typically they end up building a product that appeals to themselves, but no customer ever wants it, right? Because they've not built something that the customer wants. So typically there's a very strong mismatch between the entrepreneurs and what the customers want. That's another thing. Uh, Again, I've put in this word lack of planning for lack of other words. But yeah, so planning, again, I'm not talking of the conventional business planning, right, which is 5 years projection, etc. But most entrepreneurs just don't plan well, right? So there's some ground reality that you have to be aware of. That in a B2B market, for example, you build a product for a B2B setting, it takes, say, for the sake of discussion, it takes 6 months to convert a customer, right? Now people assume that, okay, as soon as I build the product, I would probably end up selling at least 1 or 2 units within the first week. And usually that's not true, right? They haven't actually, the entrepreneurs haven't taken the pains to go and find out that how much time does it actually take to sell a product in a B2B setting. So this lack of planning usually ends up killing entrepreneurs themselves. Sorry, killing the startups. So lack of resources is another factor, right? Again, this can sometimes be location dependent. Some cities in India have more mentors, they have greater access to funding and talent as well as compared to others, right? So if you look at if the kind of talent you want for your startup is very heavily oriented towards finance, if you want people who have experience in any of these finance and financial companies to join you, then Mumbai is probably the place to be. You'll not find the talent in Bangalore and Hyderabad as much. Whereas if you want software engineers as a talent pool to join your startup, then Bangalore is probably the place to be. So this is fairly location dependent, right? And again, these are ground realities, so research into them and then start a company in the appropriate place, right? Be either close to your talented pool or be close to your customers, right? So that's typically what is the advisable thing to do. So finding co-founders, right? Uh, so people usually end up with co-founders very easily, and that's what usually leads to breakups. So one is a fairly cliched line that exists in the entrepreneur circles is that finding a co-founder is like finding a life partner, right? You wouldn't just marry the person sitting next to you. You wouldn't do that, right? You would take time, you would talk to the person, you would have long conversations about what the vision of the future would be, etc., and you would have a courting period. So typically, a large number of investors actually value this. So if they're co-founders who worked with each other before in teams, the likelihood of this team staying together is much higher than co-founders who are working with each other for the first time, right? And that happens because after 3 to 6 months of working with each other, you'll realize that there are working patterns that just don't match, or you just don't get along well with each other. So before committing to being a co-founder, I would strongly recommend that you work with your prospective co-founders for at least 3 months or for 6 months. Work with them over a couple of projects. See if you get along well. See if you have a working chemistry. There is some such thing as chemistry, right? It works in all relationships. And then decide whether you want to be co-founders or not. Except there are a few exceptions, of course. It's not always like finding a life partner. With the co-founder, you always sign a prenup, right? Again, to give you an example, I know startups where you have two co-founders come in. Again, say 60-40 is the arrangement of the equity, right? And one co-founder ends up leaving within 6 months, but he ends up walking away with 40% of the equity of the company, right? So that person is going to enjoy and reap the rewards of all that you're building as an entrepreneur. but at the same time he's not doing any work. So make sure you discuss what you're going to do if one of you walks away or one of you has to walk away. Sometimes the family commitments, other issues get into uh, the whole thing. So discuss all these things, right? They're very uncomfortable. I had a very difficult time discussing these with my co-founders. So I have two co-founders, for example, and one of them is Lavina, who is also my wife, right? So I had to discuss all these things in detail with each of them. It's very uncomfortable talking about breaking up before you even start off, but it's something that's advisable. Uh, Another thing, right? Usually, what happens is that no matter what, let's say you both agree, there are three co-founders, say you agree on an idea that this is the product we build for this customer, differences crop up after a while. One person would want to build the company in a way that's full of introverts, for example. He wants a team that comprises people who just work silently, etc. So eventually, and the other one wants a team full of people who want to party also and who want to mix fun with work. And even small differences crop up eventually. So usually what happens, I've seen the teams that I've seen that have stayed for long, usually there's always one decision maker who's, and everyone knows that that person is the decision maker. This happens even when they're three people of the same age start, right? Again, a very uncomfortable issue, but please discuss it with your co-founder before you get into the whole entrepreneurship thing. And diversity helps, right, in terms of age and experience. So typically, uh, again, it's very difficult to make a general statement, but where the creativity required is high, like an engineering job or a design job, it's okay to go with a lower experience, right? Again, this is a personal view of mine. Whereas if you want to, where you have a job role which deals more with customers, etc., it's better to look for someone who's experienced, who's at least sold, has 2 years of selling experience, or 3 years of selling experience. Just go and meet people out there in various conferences, and you're likely to come up with a much better co-founder for your startup. The importance of mentors, right? Uh, Again, at least in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I realized that strategy and strategic discussions form a very small part of what I do. It's probably around 10% or 20%, right? A great percentage of what I do is actually very tactical and on the ground. That, hey, I want to sell uh, starting November, right? When do I register for this sales tax? Uh, Sales tax is something that you need before you start selling. When should I go about the registration process? It's a fairly simple question, right? But it's important to have a large number of mentors who actually tell you uh, about these things. So I actually have three mentors. So there's this entrepreneur who's been in this game for around 2 years, who is a mentor of mine, who gives me advice on some very tactical issues, saying that, hey, these regulations have changed. The RBI now requires clearance for this thing. So don't go ahead with this route. So they give some very tactical information, but it's very useful to have an entrepreneur who's just been in the game for 2-3 years ahead of you on your speed dial. I also have an entrepreneur who has been in the game for 5 years, who's gone through stages of VC funding, right? And typically he would give me slightly more long-term advice. So for example, we recently got angel funding, right? And I was discussing the terms of the angel funding with this particular entrepreneur, and he told me, hey, this particular term, when you get to VC funding 2 years from now, this term might actually hurt you. So make sure you remove this term before you sign the sheet with the angel investor. So a lot of these things, which are small, uh, advice that's very typical to your startup, very specific to your startup, you probably get only from entrepreneurs. So make sure you have at least 2 or 3 entrepreneurs who are ahead of you in the game, who have started much ahead of you on your speed dial, and ask them all these issues. And of course, it's always good to have one well-connected mentor, right? And you have a whole bunch of these people who are only mentoring startups these days, right? And they're very well connected in the industry. So, for example, they even give you advice like, hey, this investor is willing to invest in your company, but his sense of ethics and your sense of ethics will just not match, right? So you will probably have a lot of headache if you take money from this guy. So don't go ahead with this. A lot of this actual information, insider information, you would get only if you uh, seek mentoring from someone who's well connected, right? And I would place a tremendous amount of value on mentoring. Mentoring is what saves startups. Mentoring is what the reason why I'm still alive as a startup today. So there's this one principle, right, which you would learn in sales, and this is probably the one principle you can apply to every aspect of your startup. Literally, it's called the pipeline principle. Very simply put, uh, again, I'm not technically correct here, but I'm simplifying things. You have 100 attempts at any problem, right? Out of 100 attempts, by sheer probability or by hard work or whatever, right? You'll probably have 2 successes. And it takes you 6 months to reach those 2 successes. So this is basically the pipeline principle, right? Be aware that if you are making only 1 attempt at any problem, your chances of success are much lower than if you make several attempts. So I'll get a little more specific, right? Uh, so for example, look at the first example. I approached 30 investors. I ended up discussing with 6, and in the end, one ended up investing in my company. So it's very important for you to track these ratios in your startup. If you're not tracking these ratios, be aware of these ratios. Talk to the other entrepreneurs and be aware of how long does it take to actually get funding, how long does it take to actually convert one B2B customer, and what are the typical ratios. For example, uh, my business, we sell solar backpacks, which are bags that charge your phone, right? And this is a ratio that every 900 customers I get the word out to, one buys the bag. So now I know that, okay, if I want to sell 100 bags, I need to get the word out to 900 and 200, that many customers have. I think my math has become a little weak now. But yeah, that's how you know. So this is applicable to every aspect of your startup, right? How many companies do you need? If you want 2 customers in the B2B space, you probably need to approach 50 companies or 40 companies. Go and find out what typical conversion ratios are and track this very well in your company, right? Because as you go ahead, these conversion ratios are supposed to improve. And this applies to everything with the co-founders as well, right? If you are just talking to one prospective co-founder for your startup, you are in trouble, right? Ideally, you should have at least 3 or 4 prospects who might come and join your company, if not more, and go talk to them, work with them, and then you at least have a choice. And in all likelihood, 3 of them will not work out, right? So always keep a pipeline, always have several attempts at success. So that's one thing you need to watch out for. The next one is the principal risk reduction, which I've learned twice in my career. What this means is, as a startup, when you start a company, right, you're a bunch of enthusiastic new freshers who came up with this product, and you're coming to me and you're asking me to buy your product. So typically, it's very risky to buy from startups. So the first thing I will wonder when I'm thinking of buying from you is that, hey, this is a startup. What if this company does not even exist 3 months from now? It's very risky to buy from this company. And realize that the risks exist in all aspects, right? So let's say you're selling a product that is supposed to be cool, like a smartphone, right? So there's a risk that this phone might actually not be perceived as being cool by your target crowd. So yeah, and this applies to again all aspects. So one thing I learned at Tejas Networks while I was selling was sometimes the key to getting 10 customers is not to actually, it's just to get one customer who's seen as a role model. So at Tejas Networks, what happened was they were selling to all these telecom companies, and one of the first customers that they got was the Tatas, right? And Tatas are massively respected in the telecom space. So if the Tatas have bought from you, that means you must be doing something right, right? And another telecom company is more likely to buy from you if the Tatas have shown their trust in you. So Tejas Networks went and got Tatas as the first customer, and after that it became much easier to uh, get other customers, right? So it's important for you to identify who the role model like companies are, and if you're in a B2C space, it's important to sell to the people who are considered as role models. So for example, I sell a large number of my bags to cyclists, right? And among cyclists, when I ask around, I realize that there are these 2 or 3 people who are really looked up to. Even in the B2C space and communities, you have people who are looked up to. So try and ensure that you get these people to adopt your products, and that reduces the risk for the rest of the people to adopt your products. The same thing holds with even PR, right? The first article in the newspaper about your startup is always the most difficult one, right? That's when you go to your professors, ask them for introductions. That's when you go to other people and ask them, hey, can you introduce me to a journalist? And typically, once you get one journalist to write about you, that's okay. Then the path clears. The other journalists are more likely to write about you. The same thing holds with investors as well. Uh, the next thing is, like I mentioned, right? The worst thing you can do is to build a product in isolation as a startup. So what you need to do is you need to constantly go out there and talk to customers. So go and talk to customers, sell early, right? So what happens typically is the moment your product is ready for sales, like we made a first lot ready, available on our website, and we were waiting for sales, right? We had this grand vision that we will sell out within 7.5 minutes or 8 minutes. but it just doesn't happen. The moment we got ready for our sales, no one bought a product for a week or 2 weeks, right? Usually, another thing that might happen is that if you see someone buying a product immediately, is most likely your mother or your relative, right, trying to support you. It takes time to sell, so it's better that you release your product early and start selling early, right? By the time people hear of your product, you probably would have refined it. So if you're in doubt, it's better to err on the side of launching early than launching late. Try and get feedback again. Also, it's very helpful to talk to the distributors and retailers. So if you're selling bags, for example, go and what I did was I went and talked to all the retailers who actually sell bags, and I tried to find out that, hey, which are the best selling brands and what do they do that actually customers love them so much, and of course propose a partnership. So whenever you go and talk to any of them, it's good to get information, but it's also good to have an action item. If you go to a customer, ask him to buy a product. If you go to a retailer, ask them to stock your product. If you go to a B2B a company, right, ask them to at least try your product. So it's better to always go to each of these people with an action item and then come back with at least some information. So that's one thing that you have to do. You have to go out and network. But networking again doesn't mean you go and network with other entrepreneurs and just exchange cards. Go and talk to your prospective customers. So that is probably the talk about the entrepreneurship. So just one last thing, right? What actually motivates me? So over the last several decades, US has probably been the leader in terms of economy and GDP, right? And several of their entrepreneurs uh, have actually gotten into Fortune 500, have become Fortune 500 companies now. And look at those people. Those people are actually just like you. In fact, by sheer probability, 10% of you probably have a higher IQ than the people out there, right? But they actually went, build their companies, and still they're in the Fortune 500 today. There's a prediction that the Indian economy will probably surpass the US economy by 2000, whatever, right? Most importantly, there's this general prediction that at least two entrepreneurs from India would probably start companies that actually grow up to become Fortune 500 companies. There's a very, very good chance that that person might be right now amongst you, right? One amongst you. Or both of you might just be there in another 20 years. So if there is even a slight chance that you're destined to start a company that becomes Fortune 500 leader some 20 years from now, give yourself that chance. Go and start up today. Uh, it's usually not very risky. The worst thing that can happen if my company fails is I'll go and take up a job again, right? Lead a life where I don't change too much and so on. That's all fine. But as an IIT Madras alum, you always have opportunities later on, right? Take the plunge early. Like I mentioned, do things that make you uncomfortable. Uh, Growth and learning come to a screeching halt in your comfort zone, right? So go learn things, go start companies, and give yourself a chance to build your legacy. Thank you. I think 1 minute.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I had a question. When you talked about getting an MBA education or not, one of the main things you said there was the connections, right?
Yeah.
One of the main takeaways.
Yeah.
So, other than that, what I've read, mostly what I keep hearing about an MBA is most of what they teach you there, it can be learned on your own. So, if it's only for the connections, wouldn't it be better just to hire a guy with an MBA to get the connections?
Fair enough. That's always a good idea, right? So in general, if you're in doubt about an MBA, I would recommend you go and start up rather than go get an MBA. And second thing is that what happens is that if you look at the IIT Madras alumni database, right, which you'll have access to once you graduate, there'll be large number of alums who actually have MBAs. So the same HUL contacts which I have through access to through my IMB database, I also have access through my IITM database, right? So again, those contacts will be available to you. Uh, and there are alternate ways of getting to those contacts. Yeah.
And since you talked about MBA education, use your IIT education to sip cock and bull, okay? That's not true. You can't learn everything on your own. That's a whole lot of cock and bull. Yes, there are some things that you can learn on your own, but not everything. You're going to take a long time also.
So, and one thing I realized is that you probably wouldn't get an objective opinion on this from anyone, right? So I have done an MBA. So I'm very comfortable with accounting. I'm very comfortable with a whole of the brand building concept, etc. I don't know how it would be had I not done an MBA. So it's difficult for me to give you a very objective opinion on this. And the same holds true for even my ITM education. If someone asked me, hey, was our ITM education useful? I would not be able to give you an objective opinion because I don't know any other way, right? So that usually happens. You'll meet people who have not done an MBA and they'll tell you it's not required. You'll meet people who have done an MBA who'll tell you it's required. You'll not get an objective opinion. Either way, if you want to start a company, just start it. If you want to do an MBA and start it, then do an MBA and start it. You'll still make the most of it.
What is your take on crowdfunding in a context of a product
Yeah.
like yours?
Yeah, so we are actually even contemplating crowdfunding, right? So in the Indian scenario, we have not yet had very strong examples of crowdfunding. So in US, you have Kickstarter and a few other platforms which have been tremendously successful. So I know of a couple of Indians who have gone there and had successful crowdfunding projects. In India also you have these crowdfunding platforms. So we haven't seen success there yet. So we ourselves are thinking of launching a crowdfunding project on Kickstarter, which is in the US. Yeah. Huh?
Can you demo your product?
Oh. Okay. I didn't come prepared with that, but okay. So rather than demo, I'll just show you the product. So usually what happens is that we carry an old prototype. So this is our old prototype, right? So we have actually improved it. So this is actually a solar panel. This is a flexible solar panel, and what it does is it charges the battery inside at all times. And whenever you need, you can actually charge your phone within the bag, right? So that's how the backpack works. So this is a bit of an old prototype. So in the next prototype, we actually have a larger solar panel and a much sleeker look. So that's how this is our first product. We also have a jacket where you can charge the phone in your pocket anytime. So that we haven't gotten with us right now.
Once you have proven your product and the proof of concept, it's not very difficult to get funding. I mean, get hold of investors. But at the very early stage, in order to build a product, I don't find enough funds which are which give you resources to do the proof of concept. So do you have any suggestions? I mean, with family money or personal money may not be enough most of the time.
True. So to give you an idea, when I started Lumos, I mean, due to personal reasons, I saved up enough money, but then I had to spend it on treatment of a family member. So I had only 20,000 rupees, right? So I got into a situation where I had a product and I had to raise funds, right? Ideally, you save after a few years and that's how you go about it. But I couldn't do that. So what I did was I went to my ex-boss and he's not an investor, right? But he knew me, he's worked with me. And so he just put in 5 lakhs without any questions, even though he's not a professional investor. So usually those are the kind of stories you hear. I think IIT Madras has taken several initiatives. I mean, I was quite happy to know that as well, that you also have access to funding within the institute. And apart from that, you always have access to government funding like TEP funds, etc. are still available. Yeah. So that again is a very strong source of funding for, it depends on what you want to build. So a couple of biotech specific funds also exist.
Yeah, I mean, the funds like TAPE or TDB, they are accessible only if you are developing something with high technical innovation. But sometimes your startup may not be a technical innovation, maybe process innovation. And so in those cases, those TAPE funds or TDB government-based funds are not.
True. So one thing you can still do, right? I mean, see if you can contact more alums. Get in touch with more alums. Depending on the size of funds you need, they might actually be able to fund you, even if they're not professional investors. Again, it's probably not legal to solicit funds from unknown people, so you can't put out an ad or anything of that sort. So meet people, go to these alumni meetings, and see if you can raise funds. Again, there's no clear answer here, right? You will either get it from family or you get it from friends. If it's a B2B product, I know a few scenarios where an entrepreneur wanted to build a B2B product, and he actually went and got a pre-order from the customer, right? It's very, very difficult. You'll have to go to several prospective customers, and usually what happens is that pedigree works. Fair or not, it works, right? So usually when you have a bunch of these IITM students go and say, hey, we want to build a product, will you place an order? It might just work, right? So go and try that. But there's no clear answer to that. Yes.
Yeah, Ganda was mentioning that there are some alumni-funded initiatives. I'm sure many of you may be aware. The first alumni funding for entrepreneurship was given by Srikumar Suryanarayanan, who funded biotech entrepreneurship initiatives. That funding is still available. It basically gets you 5 lakhs initially to start a company or whatever, and then 5 lakhs later on after you have gone past the proof of concept stage. So that funding was the first one. A couple of other alumni, Anand Rajaraman and Venki Harinarayanan, later gave $100,000 each, essentially for the same purpose, but all departments are eligible. And in fact, last year we funded 5 companies out of that. So this funding is available for students as well as recent alumni, I think within 2 years, right? So these funds are specially earmarked for our students as well as recent alumni. I should also mention that in the Bay Area, we are now attempting to put together a $1 million innovation fund, again through the efforts of our alumni there. Hopefully by the end of this year, we can announce that we have raised this $1 million. If we do that, we will keep it as an endowment and use the annual returns from that to fund entrepreneurial initiatives from our students and young alumni in future. So, so keep in touch with our office and we'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, so that way it'll probably be one of the few institutes where you have funds available in-house. Just one thing I wanted to add. So you also have these accelerators out there, like the Morpheus or Chiron. So you have a whole bunch of these accelerators which take in people and which give funds to the tune of 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. So just go and search for accelerators. Basic seed funding, usually you'll manage if you at least get into these accelerators. But of course, the first 2 people you should talk to are right here. So absolutely go and talk to them before you do anything outside the institute for that matter.
Hello, sir. You had mentioned a point about turning out the idea that meets the customer needs finally.
Yeah.
If it is not meeting out, it probably the company may be out of the market. So can you share your experiences, how you have turned your idea meeting the customer needs and making it finally into a successful product?
Yeah, so I'll tell you one thing I realized here, right? People talk a lot about listening to customers, but the first challenge I actually faced was to define who customer was, right? So a solar backpack, if I ask 100 backpack users, 90% would say no. I mean, I wouldn't buy it, right? So who actually is my customer? That was actually my first big challenge. So what we did was we actually made a bag. So I didn't have time. I just soldered the whole thing myself. We just stitched it at home. We just made a solar backpack and we just went out and showed it to a large number of people asking, would you buy this? And we tried to discover who the customer was. There are probably organized ways of doing that as well, right? But we just went out and talked to a large number of people who were working in the backpack industry. We actually went and stood outside shoppers, or we actually even talked to customers of backpacks there, right? So that's the first thing we did. And then we were able to figure out that, okay, these 2 bunches of people, one was cyclists and one was bikers, they seem to, in general, be more favorable to our product. And that's how we defined who the customer was. Once that happened, things become easier, right? So now that you have a target customer in mind, the best thing to do is to actually just hand over a few prototypes to a few customers, right? So we did that initially and we got terrible feedback saying that, hey, you don't know how to build backpacks. This is not how you do it, right? Which is good. So the first thing you do is get some people to use your product, right? Even if it's for free, it doesn't matter. If they pay you, that's even better. But just get some people to use the product and give you feedback on that. And then that's how you can gradually go around building on that bit, right? But defining the customer is probably more important than, well, listening to the customer. That's probably the first step, I would say.
Sir, what is the lifetime of the solar panels you are offering?
Where is the question coming from? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so they typically are 3 years of lifetime practically. Since my company is not yet 3 years old, so I don't know in field whether that's how it reflects or not, right? You'll get solar panels with different lifetimes. It's a very specific question here, but yeah, that's how it is right now, 3 years.
Recently when you raised the first round of funding in Bangalore, uh, I heard that I think whoever offered 25 lakh in return of 10% stake, was it a planned decision for you, or because generally for raising the first round of funding at very early stage, one would prefer to go with convertible note or something else.
Yeah.
So
True. So just to give you an idea, right? I don't know how many of you know of this. So in Bangalore, I think for the first time we had an event called Shark Tanks, which is based on this American, I think, or UK reality show, right? Wherein you have few investors and you have few entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs pitch to the investors on live television, and the negotiation happens on live television. That show that you mentioned, that the whole funding actually happened at Shark Tanks. So I think CNBC was there. They're pointing the camera in our faces, and the entire negotiation happened live. Right? It's a very scary way of doing it. So to a large extent, we were actually talking to a few other investors before that at a higher valuation. Uh, but we also, at that point in time, I had like, I think, 15 minutes to take a decision. We also accorded a premium to the fact that it was the managing director of Google India who was willing to invest here, right? And we had already heard about him, like he had a reputation of being very helpful, very active in all his investments. So at that moment, we sort of decided that, hey, let's go ahead and let's go take the offer that he has made. We did some negotiation, so he had offered some amount for a higher value, and then we settled at 25 lakhs for 10%. So that's how that negotiation happened. Convertible, actually, to be honest with you, it makes a lot of sense, but uh, I've not seen too many investments being made as convertibles. Even very early on, even though valuation is very difficult to arrive at, people still invest for equity instead of convertible. I think convertibles are probably more popular in the US, if I'm not mistaken.
So your guidelines, while when you look for co-founders, it seems pretty logical, but how practical is it? I mean, do you go tell the guy that we'll discuss our idea for the next 6 months and then I'll decide whether to make you a co-founder or not?
Yeah, actually. Uh, so so what happened was the way I went about my thing, right? So we actually had a 3 to 6 month working period, right? So for example, with my third co-founder, uh, who was working in this company called Juniper Networks, fairly senior. So we decided, hey, see, we don't know if we'll get along well. Why don't we do a paid project for 3 months, right? And if we like it, then we can take forward our discussion there. And at the same time, I had a few other discussions with other prospective co-founders, like in all LEC people, LEC R&D people. And what happened was the person I was closest to, he had a personal issue and he had to go back to Kerala, which is where he was from, and that didn't work out, right? So it was, I mean, I was truly thankful to the fact that I had other options. So in a way, if you're in a hurry to start the company today, it's very difficult. But I would still strongly suggest that you work with this person, right? Work with him in at least several settings. Go work on projects, but projects still won't give you the same flavor because there's not, I mean, except for grades, there's not that much at stake. So work on the startup for 3 months at least before committing to being co-founders, right? And this works probably best if you have committed yourself, saying that, hey, I'm going to start a company anyways. Then it's for me to find the co-founders. So I would still suggest that you go through this path because working relationship is something you can't predict with just one conversation. You work together, and that's when you know whether you get along well or not. That's